The rain fell like shattered glass against the pavement. James Calloway didn't remember his name. He didn't remember the empire he'd built, the boardrooms he'd conquered, or the lives he'd crushed beneath the weight of his ambition. All he knew was the cold, the biting, unforgiving cold that soaked through his torn shirt and made his bones ache. He sat slumped against a brick wall in an alley that smelled of rust and forgotten dreams, blood trickling from a gash above his eyebrow. His hands trembled, not from fear. He didn't know what fear was anymore. He didn't know anything, except her. The woman who appeared through the rain like a ghost, quiet, careful, her eyes wide with something he couldn't name. She knelt beside him, her worn coat pooling around her knees, and whispered words he couldn't quite hear over the thunder. "You're hurt," she said softly. "Let me help you." He stared at her, and for reasons he would never understand, he believed her. Stay until the end. This story will change how you see love. And before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart. 3 weeks earlier, James Calloway was a man who didn't believe in mercy. He sat behind a desk of black marble and steel, the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office framing the city below like a kingdom he owned, and in many ways he did. Calloway Enterprises was worth billions. His name opened doors, his signature ended careers. And today, it would end hers. "Miss Monroe." Mia stood in the center of his office, hands clasped in front of her, shoulders squared despite the tremor in her fingers. She wore a simple blouse and dark slacks, clean, modest, unremarkable. Exactly the kind of person James never noticed, except today he had no choice. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked, his voice flat, clinical. I think so, sir." "Then let's not waste time." He slid a folder across the desk without looking at her. "You were responsible for the financial report submitted to the Langford account, the report that cost us a $12 million contract." Mia's breath hitched. "Sir, I don't need excuses, Ms. Monroe. I need results, and you failed to deliver." "But the error wasn't mine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Garrett changed the figures after I submitted them. I have the original files. Garrett is a senior analyst. You're a junior associate." James leaned back in his chair, his expression carved from stone. "Who do you think I'm going to believe?" Silence. Mia's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just stood there, absorbing the blow like she'd learned to absorb so many others. "You're terminated effective immediately," James continued. "Security will escort you out. You have 15 minutes to clear your desk." "Sir, please." 15 minutes, Ms. Monroe." She didn't move. For one brief flickering moment her eyes met his, and James saw something he hadn't expected. Not anger, not hatred, disappointment. As if she'd expected better from him. As if she'd believed, foolishly, that he might be more than what he was. Then she turned and walked out. James returned to his screen, already forgetting her face. It happened 3 nights later. James left the office past midnight, as he always did. The streets were empty, slick with rain. His driver had taken the night off, something about a family emergency James hadn't cared to remember. So he drove himself, one hand on the wheel, the other holding his phone as he barked orders into a conference call. He didn't see the truck, didn't hear the screech of tires or the shattering of glass, didn't feel the impact until his world exploded into white-hot pain and darkness swallowed him whole. When he woke, he was alone. The car was wrapped around a lamppost. steam hissing from the crushed hood. His head throbbed, blood dripped into his eyes. He tried to move, but his body wouldn't obey. And then, nothing. No memories, no name, no past, just the rain, the pain, and the slow creeping realization that he was no one. He wandered for hours, or maybe it was days. Time felt broken, unmoored. His expensive suit was torn and mud-stained. His Italian leather shoes were ruined. He had no wallet, no phone, no identity. Just a hollow ache in his chest that told him something was missing, something important. He collapsed in the alley because he couldn't walk anymore. The rain poured down, cold and relentless, and for the first time in his life, James Calloway felt small. That's when she found him. Mia Monroe, carrying a grocery bag in one hand and an umbrella in the other, froze when she saw him slumped against the wall. Her breath caught, her heart stuttered, because she recognized him. The man who had destroyed her life, the man who had looked at her like she was nothing and thrown her away without a second thought. And now he was broken, bleeding, lost. She should have walked away, should have let the universe deliver its karmic justice, should have felt satisfaction or relief or vindication, but all she felt was his pain. "You're hurt," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "Let me help you." His eyes, those cold, calculating eyes that had once dismissed her so easily, were now unfocused, dazed. He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Who are you?" he rasped. Mia hesitated. 1,000 answers flashed through her mind. "I'm the woman you fired. I'm the woman whose life you ruined. I'm the woman you never even saw." But instead she said, "Someone who wants to help." He studied her face, searching for something he couldn't name. Then slowly he nodded. I don't know who I am," he admitted, the words barely audible. Mia's chest tightened. She could tell him. Right now. She could say his name, tell him everything, and watch the recognition dawn in his eyes. But she didn't. "It's okay," she said gently, helping him to his feet. "Let's get you somewhere safe first." He leaned against her, heavier than she expected, and she half carried him down the street toward her tiny apartment, the one she could barely afford after losing her job. The rain fell harder, and neither of them knew that this moment, this fragile, impossible moment, would change everything. And that was the moment everything changed. Mia's apartment was barely larger than James's former office closet. The single room held a narrow bed pushed against the wall, a kitchenette with 2 burners that only one worked, and a small wooden table she'd found on the street and refinished herself. The paint was peeling near the window. The radiator clanked and hissed, but gave almost no heat. It was everything James's world was not. She helped him inside, his weight pressing against her shoulder, and guided him to sit on the edge of her bed. He moved slowly, carefully, like a man learning to inhabit his own body. "Stay here," she said softly. "I'll get something for that cut." He nodded, his gaze drifting around the small space with an expression she couldn't read. Confusion, maybe. Or disbelief that people actually lived this way. Mia disappeared into the bathroom and returned with a first aid kit, the kind you buy at a corner store for $5. She knelt in front of him and began cleaning the wound above his eyebrow with gentle, practiced movements. He winced but didn't pull away. "This might sting," she warned, dabbing antiseptic on the cut. "It's fine," he murmured. Then, after a pause, "Thank you." The words sounded foreign in his mouth, like he'd never said them before. And perhaps in the life he couldn't remember, he hadn't. Mia worked in silence, hyper-aware of how close they were. His face, pale and drawn with exhaustion, was inches from hers. She could see the faint scar on his jawline, the dark circles under his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly in his lap. This was the man who had destroyed her. And yet, looking at him now, lost, vulnerable, stripped of the armor of wealth and power, she saw something else, something human. "What's your name?" he asked suddenly. She hesitated, her hand pausing mid-motion. "Mia. Mia," he repeated, as if testing the shape of it. I don't know what I'm called." "We'll figure it out," she said quietly, resuming her work. "For now, let's just focus on getting you better. Why are you helping me?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken truths. "Because I'm not like you. Because I don't leave people bleeding in the rain. Because even after what you did to me, I can't just walk away." "Because you needed help," she said simply. He studied her for a long moment, his brow furrowing as if trying to solve an impossible equation. "You're different." "Different from what?" "I don't know. But I feel it." He paused. "Like you're real. And everything else is just what? Noise." Mia's hands stilled, their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the world contracted to just this, the space between them, charged with something neither could name. Then she pulled back, busying herself with putting away the first aid kit. "You should rest," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "You've been through a lot. Where will you sleep?" "I'll take the chair." "No." He shook his head firmly. "You take the bed. I'll manage." "You're injured, and you've already done more than enough." His tone was gentle but resolute. "Please." Mia wanted to argue, but the exhaustion in his eyes stopped her. She nodded slowly. "Okay, but if you need anything, I'll let you know." She pulled a blanket from the closet and draped it over him as he settled awkwardly into the worn armchair by the window. He was too tall for it, his legs folded at odd angles, but he didn't complain. Mia turned off the light and climbed into bed, still fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. The room was dark except for the faint glow of streetlights filtering through the thin curtains. She could hear him breathing, slow, steady, alive. "This is temporary," she told herself. "Tomorrow you'll take him to a hospital. They'll figure out who he is, and then he'll go back to his world, and you'll never see him again." But even as she thought it, something in her chest tightened. The next morning, Mia woke to the smell of something burning. She bolted upright, heart racing, and found James standing at her kitchenette, staring down at a smoking pan with an expression of complete bewilderment. "What are you doing?" she asked, rushing over. "I was trying to make breakfast," he admitted, looking almost sheepish. I thought I should do something useful." Mia turned off the burner and examined the charred remains of what might have once been eggs. "Have you ever cooked before?" "I have no idea," he said honestly, but apparently not. Despite everything, she laughed. A real laugh, surprised and genuine, that seemed to catch them both off guard. James smiled, a small, tentative curve of his lips that transformed his entire face. For a moment, he didn't look like the cold, untouchable CEO who had dismissed her without a second thought. He looked human, fallible, real. "Let me show you," Mia said, pulling out a fresh pan. She walked him through the basics: how to crack an egg, how to know when the pan was hot enough, how to season with the limited spices she had. He watched intently, absorbing every word like it was the most important information in the world. When they finally sat down to eat at her small table, the eggs were simple but warm. James took a bite and closed his eyes. "This is the best thing I've ever tasted." "You don't remember what you've tasted before?" "Then maybe this is my first real meal," he said, opening his eyes to meet hers, "and I'm glad it's with you." Something shifted in the air between them. Something dangerous. Mia looked away, focusing on her plate. "We need to take you to a hospital today. They can help you figure out who you are." "What if I don't want to know?" "What?" He set down his fork, his expression serious. "What if the person I was before? What if he was someone I don't want to be?" "You don't know that." "Don't I?" He leaned back, his gaze distant. "I woke up in an alley alone, wearing a suit that probably cost more than this entire building. What kind of man lives like that? What kind of man ends up with nothing and no one to help him? The kind who destroys people like me without a second thought," Mia thought. "The kind who values money over humanity." But she didn't say it. Instead, she said, "Maybe you're being too hard on yourself. Or maybe I'm finally seeing clearly." They finished breakfast in silence, the weight of unspoken truths pressing down on them both. Later that afternoon, Mia took him to the free clinic downtown. They waited for 2 hours on hard plastic chairs, surrounded by people who looked as tired and worn as the building itself. James watched everything with quiet fascination: the mother comforting a crying child, the elderly man clutching a cane, the teenager with the bandaged hand. People his former self would never have noticed. People who existed in a world completely separate from his own. "Does it hurt?" Mia asked, noticing him rubbing his temple. "A little. It's like there's something just out of reach. Memories, maybe. Or dreams. I can't tell the difference. The doctor will help." But when they finally saw the doctor, a tired woman in her 50s with kind eyes, the news wasn't encouraging. "Retrograde amnesia," she explained, shining a light in James's eyes. "Likely caused by head trauma. The good news is there's no sign of serious brain damage. The bad news is there's no way to predict when or if your memories will return." "How long?" James asked. "Could be days, could be months, could be never." She paused. "Do you have any identification? Family we can contact?" "No," Mia said quickly. "Nothing." The doctor looked between them, something knowing in her gaze. "Well, he'll need somewhere safe to stay, someone to monitor him for any changes." "Can you do that?" Mia's heart hammered. This was her chance to tell the truth, to reveal who he really was, to let someone else deal with the man who had ruined her life. But when she looked at James, at the uncertainty in his eyes, the vulnerability he'd never shown before, she couldn't do it. "Yes," she said quietly. "I can do that." The doctor nodded. "Then keep him comfortable. Let him rest. And if anything changes, headaches, seizures, confusion, bring him back immediately." They left the clinic as the sun began to set, painting the city in shades of amber and gold. "You didn't have to do that," James said, as they walked side by side down the cracked sidewalk. "Do what?" "Take responsibility for me. You don't even know me." "But I do," she thought. "I know exactly who you are." "Maybe that's why it's easier," she said instead. He stopped walking, turning to face her. The fading light caught in his eyes, turning them almost golden. "Mia, I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to. I do." He reached out, hesitating just before his fingers touched her arm. "You saved my life, and I don't even know why." She looked at his hand, hovering in the space between them, and felt the weight of everything unsaid. "Because I wanted to believe someone would do the same for me. Because I wanted to prove I'm better than you were. Because somewhere beneath all that ice, I hoped there was still a person worth saving. You don't need a reason to help someone," she said softly. His hand fell back to his side, and they continued walking as darkness settled over the city. Neither of them noticed the black car that had been following them since they left the clinic. Neither of them saw the man in the expensive suit watching from across the street, phone pressed to his ear. "I found him," the man said quietly. "And you're not going to believe who he's with." But love had other plans. The days that followed unfolded like pages from a book James had never read. He woke each morning in Mia's small apartment, disoriented at first, then gradually anchored by the sound of her moving quietly through the space, making coffee on the single working burner, folding clothes she'd washed by hand in the sink, humming softly to herself when she thought he was still asleep. She never asked him for anything, never complained about the burden of having a stranger in her home. She simply existed alongside him with a grace that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. On the third day, she took him with her to work. "I can't leave you alone all day," she explained, pulling on a worn jacket. "Not yet. The doctor said someone should watch you." "Where do you work?" She hesitated, something flickering across her face. "A diner. It's not much, but it pays the bills." "The bills you have because I fired you," James thought, though he didn't know why the thought surfaced so clearly. The Bluebird diner sat wedged between a laundromat and a pawn shop on a street James's former self would never have walked down. The sign was missing 2 letters. The windows were clouded with years of grease, but when Mia pushed open the door, she was greeted with warmth. "Mia, baby girl, where you been?" A large woman with silver-streaked hair and a smile that could light up the entire block pulled Mia into a fierce hug. "Sorry, Donna. I had some personal things to deal with." Donna's eyes slid to James, narrowing with protective suspicion. "Personal things got a name. This is..." Mia glanced at him, and he saw the hesitation, the weight of the secret she carried. "This is a friend. He's staying with me for a while." "A friend." Donna looked him up and down, taking in his still expensive shoes, the faint bruising on his face, the way he stood like he wasn't quite sure how to occupy space without commanding it. "Uh-huh. Well, friend, if you're gonna be here, you're gonna work. Can't have no freeloaders in my diner." James blinked. Of course. What would you like me to do?" 20 minutes later, he was standing at an industrial sink, arms deep in soapy water, scrubbing plates that seemed to multiply with every passing minute. It was humbling. It was exhausting. It was the most real thing he'd done in his entire life, or at least the life he could remember. Mia worked the floor, moving between tables with practiced efficiency, her smile genuine as she took orders and refilled coffee cups. James watched her between plates, fascinated by the way she seemed to know everyone. The construction worker who always ordered black coffee and rye toast, the elderly woman who came in every afternoon for soup and conversation, the single mother with 2 kids who Mia always slipped an extra side of fries. She saw people, really saw them, not as transactions or obstacles or assets to be leveraged, just as people. "You're staring," Donna said, appearing beside him with a knowing smirk. James startled, nearly dropping a plate. I know what you were doing, honey." She handed him another stack of dishes. "That girl's special, got a heart bigger than this whole damn city. So if you're planning on breaking it, you best walk out that door right now." "I would never." "Men always say that." Donna's voice was gentle but firm. "But Mia's been through enough. Lost her job a few weeks back. Some corporate asshole threw her out like trash. She won't talk about it, but I see it in her eyes. The hurt." James's hands stilled in the water. Something cold slithered through his chest, a feeling he couldn't name but recognized instinctively as guilt. "She deserves better than that," he said quietly. "She deserves better than most things she's gotten," Donna agreed. "So you treat her right, you hear me?" "I will." And he meant it, even though he didn't understand why the promise felt so heavy, so necessary. That evening, after the dinner rush had finally subsided, Mia found him still at the sink, methodically washing the last few plates. "You can stop now," she said, amusement coloring her voice. "You've earned your keep." He looked up, and she was struck by the contentment in his expression. This man who had once commanded boardrooms and billion-dollar deals looked genuinely happy washing dishes in a rundown diner. "I liked it," he admitted. "Helping, being useful. Most people hate dish duty." "Maybe I'm not most people." "You have no idea," Mia thought. They walked home together as the city lights flickered to life around them. The streets were crowded with people heading home from work, their faces tired but animated. James watched them all with the fascination of someone discovering a new world. "Can I ask you something?" he said as they waited at a crosswalk. "Of course." "Do you think, before I lost my memory, do you think I was a good person?" Mia's throat tightened. The truth sat on her tongue, bitter and sharp. "No. You were cold and cruel and cared more about profit margins than human beings. You destroyed lives without thought. You destroyed mine." But looking at him now, at the genuine concern in his eyes, the way he'd spent the entire day helping without complaint, the softness that had emerged in the absence of his former self, she couldn't say it. "I think," she said carefully, "that who you were doesn't matter as much as who you choose to be now." He considered this as they crossed the street. What if who I was is still in here somewhere, waiting to come back? Then maybe this is your chance to be someone better. They climbed the 4 flights of stairs to her apartment in comfortable silence. But when Mia unlocked the door, she froze. Someone had been inside, nothing was taken. Nothing was obviously disturbed, but she could feel it, the violation of her space, the subtle wrongness in the air. James noticed immediately. "What is it?" "Someone was here." Her voice was barely a whisper. He moved past her carefully, checking the small space with surprising thoroughness. The window was still locked. The door showed no signs of forced entry, but on her small table sat something that hadn't been there before. A business card. James picked it up, his brow furrowing. "Callaway Enterprises," he read aloud. Then his eyes widened. This name, Callaway. Why does that sound familiar? Mia's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the moment everything would unravel. "I don't know," she lied. He turned the card over. On the back, written in sharp, precise handwriting, "We know where he is. Call us." "Someone's looking for me," James said, his voice hollow. "Someone who knows who I am." "We don't have to call them," Mia said quickly. We have to." He looked at her, and there was something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Fear. "If people are breaking into your apartment, You're in danger because of me. I can't let that happen. James? Is that my name? He stared at the card. James Calloway. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. I don't know, Mia whispered, hating herself for the lie. Maybe. He set the card down, his hands shaking slightly. Tomorrow. We'll call them tomorrow, but tonight. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Tonight, can we just pretend none of this exists? Just for a few more hours? Mia should have said no, should have told him the truth right then, should have prepared him for the moment when his memory returned and he remembered what he'd done to her. But she was tired of carrying the weight of the past, tired of being the woman who had been discarded and forgotten. So instead she nodded. They made dinner together, simple pasta with the last of her groceries. They ate at her small table, talking about nothing important. He told her about the people he'd met at the diner, the stories Donna had shared, the way the city looked different from street level than it probably did from wherever he'd been before. And for those few hours, they weren't the billionaire and the woman he'd fired. They were just two people, finding unexpected comfort in each other's presence. But outside, in the darkness, the black car waited. And in a pristine office 50 floors above the city, a man named Richard Garrett stared at his phone, a cold smile spreading across his face. "Found you, boss," he murmured. "And soon, you'll remember exactly what you need to do." But some truths refused to stay buried. The call came at dawn. Mia woke to the sound of her phone buzzing against the wooden table, insistent and sharp. She stumbled out of bed, disoriented, and saw James already awake in the chair by the window, staring at the business card like it held all the answers to questions he was afraid to ask. "Don't answer it," he said quietly, but she already had. "Ms. Monroe?" The voice on the other end was smooth, professional, vaguely familiar. "This is Richard Garrett. I believe we need to talk." Mia's blood turned to ice. Garrett, the man who had sabotaged her work, the man whose lies had cost her everything. "I have nothing to say to you," she said, her voice sharp. "Not even about James Calloway, not even about the man currently living in your apartment?" James looked up sharply, his eyes meeting hers across the small space. "How did you—" "We've been looking for him since the accident," Garrett continued, his tone almost bored. 3 weeks of searching, and imagine our surprise when we find him with you. Of all people." He paused. "The woman he destroyed." "What do you want?" Mia's hand trembled around the phone. "I want to come get my boss, bring him home where he belongs, unless, of course, you'd prefer to keep playing house with the man who ruined your life. He doesn't remember, doesn't he?" Garrett's voice dropped, dangerous now. "Or are you just enjoying having James Calloway at your mercy, getting your revenge in creative ways? It's not like that. Then let me take him home. Let us help him recover his memory. Let him return to the life he built." Another pause. "Unless you're afraid of what happens when he remembers what he did to you." The line went dead. Mia stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear, feeling the walls of her small apartment closing in. "Who was that?" James asked, rising from the chair. "No one, just—" "Mia." He crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Please, no more secrets." "Who was that?" She looked up at him, at the concern etched across his features, at the man he'd become in the absence of his memories. And she knew she couldn't keep lying. Not anymore. "Sit down," she said quietly. "There's something I need to tell you." They sat across from each other at the small table, the morning light filtering through the thin curtains, painting everything in shades of grey and gold. Mia's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. "Your name is James Calloway," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're the CEO of Calloway Enterprises, one of the most powerful men in the city, worth billions." James said nothing, just watched her with those eyes that had learned to see. "4 weeks ago I worked for you. I was a junior financial analyst, nobody important, nobody you would have noticed under normal circumstances." She swallowed hard. "But then there was a mistake in a report. A mistake I didn't make. A man named Richard Garrett altered my work to cover his own errors, and when the company lost a major contract, you blamed me. Mia, you fired me." The words came out flat, emotionless, but her eyes glistened. "You didn't ask questions, didn't look at the evidence I tried to show you. You just decided I was expendable, and you threw me away like I was nothing." The silence that followed was suffocating. James stared at her, his face draining of color. "You've known this whole time, you've known who I was." "Yes. And you still helped me, still took me in." "I didn't plan to." Mia's voice cracked. "When I found you in that alley, I recognized you immediately, and my first instinct was to walk away, to let karma have its moment. But I couldn't, because no matter what you did to me, I couldn't leave another human being bleeding in the rain." James stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He moved to the window, his back to her, shoulders rigid with tension. "So all of this," he said, his voice hollow, "everything these past few days, you were just... what? Getting revenge? Making me dependent on you so you could... No." Mia stood too, urgency flooding her voice. "No, James, it wasn't like that. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted..." "What? What did you want, Mia?" "I wanted to see if there was something good in you." The words burst out of her, raw and desperate. "I wanted to believe that underneath all that cold corporate armor, there was a decent human being. And I found him. These past few days, I found him." He turned to face her, and the pain in his eyes nearly broke her. "But he's not real, is he?" James said quietly. "The man you've been helping, the man who washed dishes and laughed with you and felt grateful for simple pasta dinners. He's just a ghost, an empty shell. The real James Calloway is still in here somewhere, and when he comes back..." "Maybe he doesn't have to come back," Mia interrupted. "Maybe you can choose to be this person, the person you've been with me. You think it's that simple? You think I can just decide to forget an entire life, an entire identity? You've already forgotten it. And people are looking for me." His voice rose, frustration and fear bleeding through. "People who depend on me, a company, employees, responsibilities I can't just abandon because I had a convenient accident. Those responsibilities turned you into someone who could destroy lives without thinking twice. And maybe I deserved to be that person." James's hands clenched into fists. "Maybe there's a reason I built those walls. Maybe the world I live in requires that kind of strength." "That wasn't strength," Mia said, tears now streaming down her face. "That was cruelty. And you know it. The man you are right now knows it." They stood there, 5 feet apart, an unbridgeable chasm opening between them. A knock at the door shattered the moment. 3 sharp raps, official and commanding. "Miss Monroe," a voice called from the hallway. "Please open the door. We're here for Mr. Calloway." James and Mia locked eyes, 1,000 unspoken words passing between them. "You don't have to go," she whispered. "Yes," he said, his voice breaking. "I do." He moved to the door, and Mia wanted to stop him, wanted to throw herself between him and whatever waited on the other side, wanted to freeze this moment before everything shattered irreparably. But she didn't, because she'd learned the hard way that you can't hold on to something that doesn't want to stay. James opened the door to reveal 2 men in expensive suits and a woman with a tablet who looked like she'd been born organizing other people's lives. Behind them stood Richard Garrett, his smile sharp and cold. "James," Garrett said warmly, though his eyes held no warmth at all. "Thank God. We've been so worried." James looked back at Mia one last time. She stood in the center of her tiny apartment, arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. "I'm sorry," he said, "for what I did to you before, for what I don't remember, but apparently deserved to feel guilty about. James, and I'm sorry that I have to leave now, but I need to know who I really am. I need to face it." "The man you really are is standing right here," Mia said, her voice fierce despite the tears. "Don't let them take him away." But James was already stepping into the hallway, already being absorbed by the professional efficiency of people whose job was to make billionaires' problems disappear. Garrett lingered for a moment in the doorway, his eyes on Mia. "You really thought you could keep him?" he asked, almost pitying. "A man like James Calloway doesn't belong in places like this. With people like you. The sooner you accept that, the less it'll hurt." Then he was gone, and Mia was alone in her apartment that suddenly felt cavernous in its emptiness. She sank to the floor, her back against the door, and finally let herself break. 3 blocks away, James sat in the back of a luxury sedan, surrounded by people telling him who he was, what he'd accomplished, what he needed to do next. They showed him photos of himself at galas and board meetings, wearing $1,000 suits and an expression of cool indifference. He looked like a stranger. "We've arranged for the best neurologists," Garrett was saying. "They'll work on recovering your memory, get you back to normal as quickly as possible. The company needs you." James barely heard him. His mind was stuck in that small apartment, watching Mia's face as he walked away. Remembering the way she'd looked at him, not with the fear or calculation or ambition he saw in the eyes of the people around him now, but with something infinitely more dangerous. Hope. Hope that he could be better, could choose to be better. The car pulled up to a glass tower that scraped the sky, and James was ushered through lobbies of marble and steel into an elevator that shot upward so fast his stomach dropped. They brought him to an office on the 50th floor. His office, they said, with floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city below look like a toy. From here, people were just numbers, just assets to be managed. From here, it was easy to forget that somewhere down there a woman named Mia Monroe was crying because of him. Again. Garrett stood beside him at the window, satisfaction radiating from every pore. "Welcome home, boss," he said softly. "Now let's get you back to the man you're supposed to be." And as James stared out at the city that had once belonged to him, he felt the walls rebuilding themselves around his heart, brick by brick, memory by memory, until the man who had laughed in a diner and found joy in washing dishes began to fade like a dream at dawn. But some wounds cut deeper than memory. 3 weeks passed like a lifetime. James sat in his penthouse apartment, all glass and steel and designer furniture that felt cold beneath his hands, and tried to remember who he was supposed to be. The neurologists came every day. They showed him documents, photographs, business reports. His memory returned in fragments, sharp, disconnected pieces that cut him every time they surfaced. He remembered his father, a hard man who believed love was weakness and sentiment was for people who couldn't afford to be practical. He remembered building Callaway Enterprises from the ground up, working 18-hour days, sacrificing everything soft and human on the altar of success. But he also remembered Mia. Not the memory of firing her. That one still eluded him. But he remembered every moment after, her hands gentle as she cleaned his wounds, her laugh in the diner, the way she'd looked at him like he was worth saving. "You're doing well," Dr. Chen told him during one of their sessions. "Most of your memories have returned." "Most?" James echoed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm mourning." "For what?" "For the person I was when I didn't know who I was." The doctor left him with that truth hanging in the air. James stood and walked to the window. Somewhere down there in a tiny apartment he could probably buy with pocket change, Mia was living her life without him. Knock, knock. Garrett appeared in the doorway. "The board's asking when you'll be ready to resume full duties." "Soon." "Good. There are some decisions that need your signature, personnel restructuring." He pulled out a tablet. "We're cleaning house." James scrolled through the list of names, and there, near the bottom, he saw it. Mia Monroe. Status, terminated. Reason, performance issues. His blood turned to ice. "This woman," he said carefully. "Why is she on this list? She screwed up a major account, cost us millions. You fired her yourself 6 weeks ago." The memory slammed into James with the force of a physical blow. Her face, her trembling hands, the disappointment in her eyes when he dismissed her without listening. "But the error wasn't mine. Mr. Garrett changed the figures after I submitted them." "She said you altered her work," James said sharply. "She was covering her ass. You saw through it." "Did I look at her original files?" Garrett shifted. "You didn't need to." "Show me her files now." "Boss, this is ancient history. Show me the files, Richard. Now." For the first time, Garrett looked uncertain. "I don't think we kept them." "Everything is archived. That's company policy. I wrote that policy." James stood. "Get me her files within the hour." "There's no point. Get out!" The door clicked shut, and James was alone with the weight of his returning memories. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Henderson, pull all archived files for Mia Monroe. Everything." He spent the next 6 hours going through every document. And with each file he opened, the truth became clearer. Garrett had sabotaged her, altered her work after submission, covered his own error by sacrificing someone powerless enough not to fight back. And James had destroyed an innocent woman's career without a second thought. Dawn was breaking when James grabbed his coat and headed for the door. He took the subway, something he hadn't done in 15 years. Stood pressed between tired workers heading to early shifts. He saw them now, really saw them. People like Mia. The Bluebird Diner was just opening when he arrived. Donna looked up from behind the counter, recognition flickering in her eyes. "Well, well," she said slowly. "Look who remembers where he came from." "Is she here?" James asked. "Not yet. Lunch shift." Donna studied him. "You got your memory back?" "Yes." "And?" "And I remember what I did to her, what I am." He slumped onto a stool. "I don't blame her if she never wants to see me again." Donna poured him coffee. "That girl cried for 2 weeks straight after you left. Not because you fired her, but because she thought she'd lost the man you'd become. I don't know if I can be that man. Honey, amnesia didn't make you kind. It just removed the excuses you used to avoid being kind. She leaned forward. That man was always in there. You just have to choose to let him out. The door chimed. Mia stood in the doorway, her coat damp from morning mist, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked thinner, tired, but still beautiful. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither could breathe. Mia, James started, standing. She turned and walked back out. He followed her into the street, calling her name, his shoes splashing through puddles as she walked faster. Mia, please, I just want to talk. There's nothing to talk about. Her voice was tight. You got your memory back. You went back to your life. That's how it was always going to end. I know what I did to you, he said, and she stopped walking. I know about Garrett's lies. I know I fired you without listening. I know I destroyed your career because it was easier than asking questions. Slowly she turned to face him. So you remember. Everything. He stepped closer. And I can't change what I did. But I can tell you that you were right. The man I was, he wasn't strong. He was a coward, and the only time I've ever been brave was when I didn't remember how to be afraid. Tears slipped down Mia's cheeks. Why are you here, James? Because I'm choosing. I'm choosing to be the man you saw when you looked at me in that apartment. The man who washed dishes and laughed over burnt eggs. The man who learned that the best things in life can't be bought or controlled. You can't just choose to be different. Then help me. He reached for her hand slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. Teach me how to see people the way you do. How to live in the real world instead of the one I built to protect myself. James, I'm in love with you, he said, and the words hung between them like a prayer. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you cleaned my wounds. Maybe when you saved me even though I destroyed you. But I love you, Mia, and I don't want to go back to being the man who couldn't see that. She stood there, raindrops catching in her hair, her hand trembling in his. I don't know if I can trust you, she whispered. I know. I don't know if you'll really change. I know that too. Then why should I believe you? James squeezed her hand gently. Because I'm standing in the rain on a Tuesday morning, holding the hand of a woman who has every reason to hate me. And I'm not running. I'm not hiding. I'm just here, being human, and hoping that's enough. Mia searched his face, looking for the cold indifference that had once defined him, but all she found was vulnerability and hope and love. But forgiveness is earned, not given. Mia didn't say yes that morning in the rain, but she didn't say no either. I need time, she told him, pulling her hand gently from his. I need to see if this is real, if you're real. I understand, and I need you to prove it. Not with words or grand gestures, with actions, with consistency. She looked at him, her eyes still guarded. Show me that the man who washed dishes wasn't just a temporary version of you. Show me he's who you choose to be. James nodded. How long? As long as it takes. She walked back into the diner, leaving him standing in the rain. But this time he didn't feel lost, he felt anchored. For the first time in his life, he knew exactly what he needed to do. The next morning, James walked into Callaway Enterprises with purpose carved into every step. The executive floor fell silent as he passed. Assistants straightened, senior managers stepped aside. Everyone watched the legendary CEO return to his throne. But James didn't go to his office. He went to HR. "Pull Richard Garrett's file," he told the director. "Every transaction he's authorized in the past 2 years, every report he's signed, every employee he's recommended for termination." "Sir, that's highly unusual. Do it." 3 days later, the evidence was undeniable. Garrett had been systematically covering his mistakes by sacrificing junior employees. Mia wasn't the first. She was just the most recent. James called an emergency board meeting. "Richard Garrett is terminated, effective immediately," he announced, sliding the documentation across the table, "for fraud, misrepresentation, and systematic abuse of power. Security is already clearing his office." The board members exchanged glances. Garrett had been a favorite, had climbed the ranks through charm and calculated loyalty. "James," one of the older board members said carefully, "are you sure about this? Garrett's been with us for years. He's delivered results." "He's delivered lies," James said flatly, "and I enabled him because I was too arrogant to question the narrative. That ends today." He spent the next week personally reviewing every case where Garrett had been involved in a termination, found 3 other employees who'd been wrongfully blamed. He called each of them personally. "Ms. Chen, this is James Calloway. I'm calling to apologize and offer you reinstatement with back pay and a promotion." Each call was harder than the last. Each apology scraped against years of pride and practiced indifference, but he made them all. And then he made the most important one. "Ms. Monroe, this is James Calloway. I'd like to formally offer you reinstatement to Calloway Enterprises with full back pay, a senior analyst position, and a written apology in your permanent file acknowledging the company's error." Silence on the other end. "Mia, I heard you," she said quietly. "I'm just processing." "You don't have to accept. I know I have no right to ask you to come back to a place that holds so much pain, but I wanted you to know that I'm making it right. Or trying to." "What happened to Garrett?" "He's gone, terminated, blacklisted." Another pause. "You didn't have to do that for me." "I didn't do it for you," James said honestly. "I did it because it was right, because I spent years choosing convenience over justice, and I'm done being that person. I need to think about it. Take all the time you need." But Mia didn't accept the job. Instead, 3 days later, she showed up at his office unannounced. James looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his face. "Mia, I'm not taking the job," she said, standing in the center of the room where she'd once been fired. "Not because I don't appreciate the offer, but because I don't want to be here." His face fell. "I understand. But I will accept your help with something else." She pulled out a folder. "I want to start a foundation for people who've been wrongfully terminated, who can't fight back against powerful companies, who need legal help and career support." James stood slowly. "Tell me more." "I've been thinking about this since you left, about how many people are out there like me, like the others Garrett destroyed. People who just need someone to believe them, to fight for them." She met his eyes. "I don't want your money out of guilt. I want your partnership, your business expertise, your connections. Help me build something that actually helps people." A slow smile spread across James's face, genuine, warm, the smile of the man who'd laughed in a diner. "When do we start?" They spent the next month building the foundation together. James discovered he was good at this, using his skills for something that mattered beyond profit margins. He negotiated with lawyers for pro bono hours, connected with HR consultants willing to donate time, used his network to create opportunities for people who'd been shut out of corporate systems. And he did it all without trying to take over, without trying to control. He listened to Mia's vision and helped her build it, stepping back when she needed space and stepping up when she needed support. They worked late into the evenings, side by side in a small office James had rented, nothing like his penthouse corner suite, but somehow more real. They ordered takeout and debated strategy and slowly, carefully rebuilt trust through shared purpose. One night as they were packing up to leave, Mia said, "You're different." "How so?" "You listen now, really listen. You don't just wait for your turn to talk or dismiss ideas that aren't yours." She smiled. "It's nice. I had a good teacher. The amnesia. You." He looked at her across the desk covered in papers and coffee cups. "You showed me what it looks like to see people, to care about their stories, to believe that everyone deserves dignity and second chances." Mia's expression softened. "You're doing the work, James. That's what matters." "Is it enough?" he asked quietly. "For you?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Ask me again in another month." So he did. And the month after that, and the one after that. He didn't push, didn't demand, just showed up consistently, proving through action that the man he'd become wasn't a fluke or a phase. He sold his penthouse and moved into a modest apartment in Mia's neighborhood. Started taking the subway again, volunteered at the Bluebird Diner on weekends, washing dishes alongside Donna, who watched him with knowing eyes. "You're really doing it," she said one Saturday afternoon. "Changing." "Trying to," James corrected. "Honey, there's no trying. You either do or you don't. And you're doing." She paused. "That girl's noticing, by the way." Yeah. She watches you when you're not looking. Smiles at the small things. She's scared, but she's softening." Donna bumped his shoulder. "Don't screw it up." "I won't." 6 months after that morning in the rain, the foundation launched officially. The event was small, intimate, nothing like the corporate galas James used to attend. Just the people they'd helped, the volunteers who'd believed in the mission, and a handful of supporters who'd made it possible. Mia stood at the front of the room, speaking about second chances and human dignity and the power of believing in people others had thrown away. And James stood in the back watching her, feeling something he'd never felt in any boardroom or corner office. Pride, not in his own achievements, but in hers, in them. After the event, as people filtered out and the room grew quiet, Mia found him by the window. "You didn't have to hide in the back," she said. "This was your moment. I didn't want to overshadow it." "You couldn't if you tried." She smiled. "Not anymore." They stood side by side, looking out at the city lights. "Mia," James said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "That morning in the rain, when I told you I loved you, you never answered." "I know." "Can I ask again?" She turned to face him, and in her eyes he saw everything he'd been hoping for. Trust, warmth, love. "You can ask," she said. "I love you, Mia Monroe. Not because you saved me in an alley, not because you showed me who I could be, but because of who you are, your strength, your kindness, your refusal to become bitter, even when you had every right to be." He took her hand. "I love you, and I'm asking if there's any chance you could love me back." Mia's eyes glistened. "I already do, you idiot." And then she kissed him. But love is just the beginning of the story. 2 years later, the rain fell again. But this time, James didn't run from it. He stood outside the Bluebird Diner, collar turned up against the autumn drizzle, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. Through the window, he could see Mia inside, laughing with Donna over something he couldn't hear. Her hair was longer now, swept back in a loose braid. She wore jeans and a sweater, simple, comfortable, entirely herself. She looked up and caught him watching. Her face transformed with a smile that still made his chest ache. He walked inside, shaking rain from his jacket. "You're going to catch pneumonia standing out there like a lovesick teenager," Donna said, but her eyes were warm. "Maybe I am lovesick," James replied, handing Mia her coffee, black, 2 sugars, exactly how she liked it. "You're definitely sick," Mia teased, accepting the cup, sick of being sensible. They sat at their usual booth by the window, the one where they'd shared countless conversations over the past 2 years. The foundation was thriving now. 3 full-time staff members, dozens of volunteers, hundreds of people helped. Mia ran it with the same quiet competence she brought to everything. And James had found his place beside her, not leading, not controlling, just supporting, building something that mattered. "I got the call this morning," Mia said, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "The Henderson case, we won." James's face lit up. "Mia, that's incredible. She gets her job back. Full compensation, and the company has to implement new whistleblower protections." Mia's voice was thick with emotion. "She called me crying, said we gave her hope when she had none left." "You gave her hope," James corrected gently. "You built this. You created something that changes lives." "We created it," she insisted. "Together." He reached across the table, lacing his fingers through hers. "Together," he agreed. Donna brought them pie without asking, apple warm with cinnamon that made the whole diner smell like home. "You 2 are disgustingly sweet," she said, but she was smiling. "Makes me believe in love again." After they finished, James and Mia walked through the rain-slicked streets, no destination in mind, just existing in each other's presence. The city looked different now, softer, more human. Or maybe James just saw it differently. "Do you ever miss it?" Mia asked. "The power. The penthouse, the boardrooms." James considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it, reducing people to numbers, not having to feel the weight of their stories." He squeezed her hand. "But then I remember what I gave up to have that simplicity, my humanity, my ability to connect. You didn't give me up. I'm right here. You know what I mean." He stopped walking, turning to face her under a streetlight. "The old James would never have had you, would never have deserved you. He would have looked right through you just like he did that day in his office. But you're not him anymore." "No," James said softly. "I'm not. And I'm grateful every single day that I got the chance to become someone else." They continued walking until they reached the alley where it had all begun. It looked different in daylight, smaller, less ominous, just a forgotten corner of the city where broken things sometimes found their way. "This is where you found me," James said, staring at the brick wall where he'd collapsed 2 years ago. "Where you found yourself," Mia corrected. "No, where you found me. Where you chose kindness over revenge. Where you saved a man who didn't deserve saving." Mia stepped closer, her hand finding his cheek. "Everyone deserves saving, James. That's what you taught me right back. Even powerful men who make terrible mistakes. Even CEOs who forget how to be human." Everyone deserves a second chance. He leaned into her touch, closing his eyes. I love you, Mia Monroe. I love you too, James Calloway. They kissed in the rain, in the same alley where their story had truly begun, where a billionaire had lost everything and found the only thing that mattered, where a woman had chosen compassion over bitterness and changed 2 lives in the process. When they pulled apart, James reached into his pocket. I have something for you, he said. Mia raised an eyebrow. If this is an expensive piece of jewelry, I'm throwing it in a puddle, he laughed. It's not, I promise. He pulled out a worn business card, the same one that had been left in her apartment 2 years ago. Calloway Enterprises. But on the back, in his own handwriting now, he'd written something new. You asked me once why you should believe I'd changed. Here's my answer, because I choose you. Every day, in every way, forever. Mia read it, tears streaming down her face mixing with rain. James, he knelt down right there in the alley, in the rain, in the place where he'd lost himself and been found again. I'm not the man I was, he said, and I'm not perfect. I still make mistakes. Still have moments where the old instincts surface, but every day I choose to be better. I choose compassion over coldness, connection over control, love over everything else. He pulled out a simple ring. Nothing ostentatious, just a silver band with a small stone that caught the light. Marry me, Mia. Not because I'm trying to possess you or control you, but because I want to spend the rest of my life choosing you. Mia dropped to her knees in front of him, not caring about the wet pavement or the dirt or the world watching. Yes, she whispered. Yes, yes, yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, and they held each other in the rain, 2 people who'd found love in the wreckage of broken lives. 3 months later, they married in a small ceremony at the Bluebird Diner. No cathedral, no society photographers, no guest list of powerful names and political connections, just the people who mattered, Donna, the foundation staff, the families they'd helped, friends from Mia's neighborhood who'd become James's family. Dr. Chen came smiling at the man whose amnesia had saved his soul. Even some of James's former employees came, the ones he'd personally apologized to, the ones who'd seen him change and believed in second chances. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising not perfection but effort, not eternal happiness but daily choice, not a fairy tale but a real, messy, beautiful love built on truth and forgiveness. And when James kissed his wife, he thought about that night in the rain, the moment he'd lost everything and gained the only thing worth having. Years later, when people asked how they met, Mia would smile and say, "He was lost, and I helped him find his way home." And James would add, "She saved my life." In every way a person can be saved. They built a life together that looked nothing like the one James had imagined in his former existence. No mansion, no empire, no isolation at the top of glass towers, just love. Just purpose. Just 2 people choosing each other every single day. The rain still fell sometimes, but now they danced in it. He thought it was just one last meeting, but it became the beginning of everything. If this story touched your heart, like, comment, and subscribe for more romances that remind us love can change everything.